All right. That was weird. Okay. Okay. I think my sound is okay. So sorry everybody for that confusion. Somehow I set up the streams ahead of time, and then when I went live, it went live on the right, like pre-stream, but then there was no chat. So then I was like, okay, that's weird, and I didn't know how to turn the chat on. I'm still kind of new to the YouTube interface. So then I ended the stream, as you know, and then I came back on the stream, and then now it's like the 40K stream for Thursday. So I'm probably gonna have to redo that one again. Anyway, so we're here. It is Cardboard versus Plastics, episode 3. Not live 40K, if that's what it says below on YouTube. And yes, so the live 40K will be on Thursday night. And yeah, we are here. So welcome to Can Hammer TV and Cardboard versus Plastics, episode 3. So if you're new to the channel, we have started to cover board games. There is a community poll asking people what kind of board game coverage they'd like to see. So far, the majority have picked live playthroughs, and the second most common pick was reviews. And then the least favorites were unboxings and the other one. I can't remember the other poll. So we will be hopefully getting our first live playthrough of a game probably next week. It just requires a little bit more planning because I need to get someone else to play as opposed to just playing by myself. So I'm not really into solo gaming. So we'll figure something out. Tonight we will be doing our first review, and we will be reviewing one of our favorite games, and one of the games we've had for the longest and played the most number of times, which is Wingspan. Wingspan by Stonemaier Games and Elizabeth Hargrave. And if you're into board games and you have not, dare I even say, if you don't own a copy of Wingspan, where have you been? It's probably one of the biggest selling board games of all time. And it just took off for a multitude of reasons and is recently, even now for I believe the second year running, been in various different places. Obviously people vote in different places, but on the Dice Tower, which is probably one of the biggest YouTubing channels for board games, the People's Choice #1 board game of 2022. And it is very popular. It was #1 on Board Game Geek for a long time. A lot of people have Wingspan. It's so popular, it's in big box stores now. You can pretty much get it anywhere. And yeah, we've played it a number of times. It's almost always the game I use to introduce non-board gamers to board games, and it almost always gets them hooked. And then a lot of those people end up buying Wingspan, and then they go on and also play it a lot and then pass it to other people, and then they buy it, and so it's like a propagating disease. So I know our friends Rio and Camilla, they played it with us, and then they bought a copy that night, and then they have since spread it to 5 other families, including Japanese versions in Japan. And so it is definitely a great game. And as I say, it's usually the game I use to introduce people into board games because it's a great combination of easy to learn and play, difficult to master, yet slightly tricky, but not too difficult, very engaging. Anyway, we're gonna talk about all that tonight. So if you haven't picked up a copy of Wingspan, seriously consider it. You can get it in most places, game stores, and big box stores. And because of Wingspan, I know that this is a scissor-tailed flycatcher. There you go. So you do learn something too. So we're going to be covering Wingspan tonight. So for the reviews, what we're going to do is it's going to be fairly comprehensive, because I think if you're going to do a review, you might as well make it comprehensive. I've split the review up into 10 categories, and I'm going to give the game a rating out of 10 in each of those categories. So at the end, you have a 100% score. And then we'll have a score. And then at some point, we can probably go through all the games that we reviewed and kind of rank them based on those numbers. And you can certainly review your experiences with ours. So We have played this game many times. It still is our favorite board game. Well, maybe not my favorite anymore, but it was for a long time. It's my wife's favorite board game. How about you, Shar?
Pretty good.
Pretty good for my daughter. And my daughter started playing this when she was like 5. And so it's definitely something you can play with younger children too. And we'll cover that too in the review. But we played it a lot. We've played it at 2 players, we've played it at 3 players, 4 players, and once at 5 players. You can now play it online at Board Game Arena, which is a great way of playing it with your friends when you can't get together physically. And so we've played it at many different counts. There are many expansions. We're not going to review the expansions specifically tonight. We're going to talk about the game as a whole, but there are many expansions covering birds from all the different parts of the world, basically, with the most recent being the Asia expansion and the nesting box, which we'll touch on briefly after the full review. But yeah, we have all the expansions and the nesting box, and it's just a great investment for hours and hours of entertainment. Okay, I think one of the reasons it got really popular is, first of all, it's a well-designed game. It's beautiful. The components are beautiful, like all Stonemaier games. And it was designed by a woman, which is super rare in board gaming. And so that was definitely a part of it. And it's beautiful, and it's about a subject that, you know, I guess you could have your own appeal or no appeal, but as somebody who had never thought of birds before, I'm not an ornithologist or a bird enthusiast or anything, it's just a theme that captures your imagination, regardless of what background you come from. The artwork really helps, and so it's a great, captivating game, and you find yourself learning a lot about birds as you play the game. I think my daughter, when she first started to play this, she would actually, in her spare time, get out all the cards for all the birds, and there's a ton of cards, beautiful artwork, and lay them all out on the table and like group them up in various ways or categorize them or just look at them. And then we would be walking around the neighborhood and you would see these birds and you'd be like, that's a, you know, red winged whatever, what's that, that's just one bird. Yeah, red-winged blackbird. We've seen it around our neighborhood so many times, and we only knew what that was because of Wingspan. So it's pretty cool. Another small anecdote before we start. So we went to this, there's like a reptile farm near where we live, and they had this outdoor area where there were birds of prey or raptors. And my daughter, who was maybe only 5 at the time, was going around naming all these birds because she'd seen them all in Wingspan. The guy was like, wow, you know a lot about birds. That was pretty interesting. Okay, we're gonna transition to the other table and start the review. So here we go. All right, so we're gonna put the table cam up and I'm gonna take the overlay down. So you're gonna see that disappear, just so we have a full view. Okay, I'm gonna move over here. All right, while we're talking, so we've taken away the Patreon for the channel, and what we've done now is that if you want to continue to support the channel financially, you can just press join on YouTube and join our membership, and it's the same price as the Patreon, $4.99. And then you can have some emojis and other, I think there's like little stars and stuff that you can put in the chat, whatever. But that's just replaced our Patreon. There's no obligation for people to join. There's gonna be no pay-gated content. So just like before, if you really want to support what we do, you can always support through the joining the community. And as always, feel free to chat and ask questions about what we're talking about, and it's all free. You don't have to pay anything to ask questions. All right, let's go. Okay, Shar, move over. Okay. Oh, can't do that. Can't see the chat. Okay, so here we have some of the components of Wingspan. So obviously this is not the full game setup because there's only one board. So if you had multiple players, you would obviously see multiple boards around a central area. But basically shows you what some of the components are. So, you know, you have the player board, and I think I have 3 or 4 different kinds of player boards now because the various expansions all came up with different player boards, and so this is the most recent one that came with the Asia version. So you can see some of these mountainous kind of terrain that you see in China. And then you have generally what you're trying to do in Wingspan, so this is not a teach, but what you're trying to do is to add birds to your player board and build an engine. So it's basically an engine building game, and the birds are the components of your engines, because when you have played birds and you do your actions, it allows you to gain more resources for the same number of actions. It's a game where you have a fixed number of turns for the game. So you start off with 8 turns, then 7, then 6, then 5, and 4 rounds. So everybody knows exactly how many turns they're gonna have. So you wanna try and make your turns as efficient as possible. And you do that by playing out these birds, which have special abilities. This is an example of a bird. And you can see that the art is amazing, and they're all like that. And not focused very well, but and then you have these little tokens that are food tokens. You've got this neat little thing here, which is a bird feeder. It's a cardboard bird feeder, and you pay for your birds by using food, and you get the food by rolling the dice in the bird feeder. So it's kind of tactile and cool and fun, although you don't need to use that. There's objectives that you want to try and achieve on your own in terms of objective cards, and then there are group objectives per round. And that's basically what you're doing. You have a hand of cards. You need to gather food in order to play birds, and then your birds can lay eggs. You need eggs to play bigger birds, and then you can use birds to increase your card draw. And the eggs, it must be said, look like Cadbury mini eggs, and they look so much like them that you actually want to eat them. And I think one person actually tried to put one in their mouth one time, which you can't do. They're hard plastic, but they look so delicious, and they're all different colors. Okay, so basically it's a 1 to now 7 player game. That's engine building, where you gain food, gain cards, and play birds into your player mat in order to increase the efficiency of your engine. And then whoever has the most points at the game wins. It's a set number of rounds, and so everybody knows kind of what's going on. And so it's pretty straightforward in how you play, and but difficult to master. And there are so many birds. So just the base game alone comes with a huge stack of birds. They're all different. And then every expansion adds like 80 or more cards. So you can get a ton of cards, and you can take expansions in or out as you wish. Okay, so that's the general kind of gist of the game. As it's not a run through or an instructional video, we're just doing a review. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the theme and the presentation. Okay, so the everything is beautiful in this game. If you know Stonemaier games, you know that they are usually very beautiful and well produced, and this game is no exception. This is one of the appendix books, and it's got this kind of what do they call it? Special paper. It's a beautiful paper with texture, and the instruction books is well written and easy to read and well laid out. It's, you know, the presentation, the bird theme is really something you didn't think that you would want in your life, but you do actually. And the theme is so well presented. The cards really go with the theme for a number of reasons. First of all, the artwork, and I love it that it's all hand-drawn art and not pictures. And then the theme really matches to the mechanics of the game, because every bird may have one of these triggered abilities, and the abilities is often reflected in what the bird does in real life. So for example, there are some birds that lay eggs in other birds' nests. They don't lay eggs in their own nest. So that bird will have an ability that says when you lay eggs, you lay the egg in another bird's nest, not that bird's nest. So it's really interesting how they've made a lot of the thematic connections to the mechanics of the game. There are birds that are predators. I don't know if we can find any of those quickly here, but like the hawks and the eagles, for example, they are predators. And so what happens is when you activate their ability, they will actually, you draw a card from the deck, and if that bird has a wingspan, a width that's less than a certain amount, they get eaten by that bird and tucked underneath that card and gives you a victory point. So it's very cool how the mechanics of the birds are reflected in their kind of real life, how they work. And to that end, you know, there's information at the bottom of the card telling you where the bird is from, its Latin scientific name, and a little tidbit about the bird or its habitat, which makes it interesting. And this game was designed with, you know, some kind of ornithological society or something. I can't remember which. And so it's all trying to be as informative as possible. So the presentation is really good, and you really get a handle on the theme, and it really does relate to the mechanics of the game. So it's really cool, and when your mat is full of birds and they all have eggs and stuff laying on them, it's really pretty cool. Okay, so for theme and presentation, we give it an 8. The next is components. Okay, so components are excellent. And again, with Stonemaier games, you're gonna get excellent components. The card is thick, it doesn't bend, it's not warped. The eggs are amazing, these are amazing components. You know, you can always tell a game, if you instantly wanna buy upgraded components for a game, that means components have something to lacking. The dice are solid wood and very nicely printed. The cards are decent thickness that allow you to shuffle, because you know, if you gotta shuffle, you know, 100 and something cards, you want them to be easily shuffleable, and these are definitely shuffleable but not too flimsy. They're well printed, you know, even the first player marker is beautiful. This is the tail right there. And so overall, the production is amazing. We give it an 8 for 2 reasons. The food tokens, while thick cardboard, it's a little bit, it would have been cool to have some meeples or something. That would have, you know, given the game maybe more expense and everything, but you know, I know a lot of people who upgrade the food tokens to be actual like meeples. So that's one. The other thing that is the bird feeder. So the bird feeder is made up of thick cardboard that you put together, and you have to take it apart to put it in the box. Although with the nesting box, you don't have to do that. But normally you would have to take it apart. And so every time you take it apart and put it together, the edges get worn and it just starts to fall apart. And so eventually so the roof was the first thing to break, so we don't even put the roof on anymore because these end bits here were getting frayed, and it's hard to roll with the roof because you have to kind of slip it in the back. So now we just play without the roof, but then eventually what you end up doing is just playing without the bird feeder at all, and you just roll the dice and you use a mat or something else to represent the bird feeder, because you have to keep track of dice that are in the bird feeder and dice that are outside the bird feeder. So the longevity, while this is amazing, like really cool in terms of design and theme, like it's really good because the food comes out of the bird feeder, the longevity of the bird feeder is definitely one to worry about a little bit. I bought an extra one when I bought the first game, and then the nesting box came with another one. So I have 3 of them, and the first one's definitely kaput. So the longevity of the bird feeder is a little bit suspect. These trays, these come with the nesting box, these nice, solid, unflimsy trays, so that's great, but the normal game does not come with these. They come with little plastic trays, which are actually very good. We don't have them here to show you. And then this big tray here, which holds all the cards. So this is not only the display tray for the cards, but also holds all the cards inside. and each of the games expansions comes with its own one of these. This is an extra thick one from the nesting box. So, and then this storage becomes the display for the game, which is great. Obviously, you don't have to use this display, but it's really nice. So it's a really nice little touch there. And the nesting box for sure comes with these nice inserts now, which have slots custom made for all the various things, which is super cool. Okay, so 8 out of 10 for the components, mostly let down by the food tokens and the longevity of the bird feeder. Okay, complexity. And when we say complexity, obviously a game can be complex or not complex, but complexity relative to the weight of the game. So I would consider Wingspan a medium weight game. If people know what they're doing, you could probably play a game with around 20 to 30 minutes per player. So it's definitely a medium weight game, and its complexity is low in terms of learning the game and playing the game. It's really simple. You only have 4 things you can do, and then when you do it, it's usually pretty straightforward, and then you just activate stuff as you go. And so complexity wise, it's pretty straightforward, and it's definitely suitable to the weight of game. Some games are like super, heavy and ultra complex. Some games don't really match their weight of game, but I think it's well suited to what it's supposed to be, and that's probably why it's so popular and why it's so easy to pick up and spread to other people. So we gave it a 9 out of 10 for complexity relative to weight. Okay, the next category is teachability. So, Charlotte, how difficult was this for you to learn as like a 5-year-old?
I don't remember that much, but I remember asking a lot of questions because probably I wasn't listening for most of it, but
yeah, I mean,
the other part was when we still had the roof on,
okay.
It's my turn to roll the board.
Yeah, so teaching Wingspan is pretty easy. You can get playing in probably 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. As I said, there's only 4 actions to teach. There's the symbols is pretty minimal. There's not a lot of symbology in the game. Everything is very colorful. The cards, once you learn to read them, are pretty straightforward. It's a very straightforward, everything is out here in front of you. You can play open hand so people can follow what you do. It's pretty easy to teach, and definitely very quick to get started the first time, as well as very quick for the game to get started in terms of setup. So I think we gave teachability a 9 because it's super teachable. The rule book is very clear. It's not very thick or daunting. And yeah, so it's a super teachable, easy to teach game. Okay, analysis paralysis is the next category. So if you never heard that term before, basically it's when the potential for somebody to be paralyzed by difficulty making a choice in terms of what to do. Either because there's too many things they can do, there's too much variation in how they can do it, or the actions are so they're all so close together that it's difficult to determine which one's better and which one's worse. Now, some of this is because of how the game is designed. Some of this is because of how the player is. So some people are more prone to overanalyzing than others. So I think there's a little bit of both in analysis paralysis, or AP as we'll call it. But definitely AP can be promoted by game mechanics. So how much analysis paralysis is there in Wingspan? And the other thing to note is, the more analysis paralysis you have, does it stop the game? Everybody has to stop and wait while this person hums and haws for 10 minutes? That's important too. Or can the game kind of go on? And so I think in Wingspan, we gave it an 8 for analysis paralysis. I think by and large, it's fairly, you make a plan and it's fairly straightforward in terms of what you need to do. I think the main difficulty in figuring what to do is what's the best way forward, which birds are better to play and when. The order at which you do things is super important because of the limited number of actions and when the rounds break. And that's influenced to a certain extent by what food is available in the bird feeder at any one time, because that's a random element, and also what birds are available at any one time on the display, because that's also a random element. Other than those couple of random elements, the game is fairly non-random, and so there is a degree of analysis and good and bad plays. But in terms of paralysis, I've not really experienced a lot of analysis paralysis when playing Wingspan at all numbers from 2 to 5 players. So obviously, as I said, some people will be more prone to paralysis than others, but in general, it's not a very paralyzing set of mechanics. So we gave it an 8 out of 10. Okay, the next category is called tension and player interaction. So by tension, we mean when you do something, like when it's not your turn, do you feel like you're on edge? Like if he does, like, I need that, or I need to get to that space first, or I need to get this bird first, or I need to play this first before somebody else does this. And I think there is a certain amount of tension in Wingspan, but not a huge amount of tension. By and large, it is a game that you are playing by yourself. So you are building your engine, you have your birds in your hand. There's some interaction with other players in terms of who takes the food and what food is available, and who takes the birds and what birds are available. But there's no negative player interaction, or NPI as I like to call it. And there's no way that you can almost no way you can directly influence what somebody else is doing. So you're optimizing your own little world here. And so in that way, there's not a lot of interplayer interaction, certainly no negative interaction. And that way, it does decrease the tension a little bit. Most of the tension is like, okay, I'm gonna hit these end resources. Am I gonna get first or second or third place? And how many eggs does he have? He's gonna beat me. Do I need to put more eggs? So there is a little bit of tension as you get closer to the end of the rounds and at the end of the game. But by and large, it's fairly tension-free. And no negative interaction. Now, we give it an 8 out of 10 because we don't like negative player interaction, but if you wanted some of that, then this game does not have it for you. So you might give that a different rating. Okay, the next category is choices and randomness. So this category refers to, are your actions meaningful? Do the choices you make have true impact on the game, or are they fairly prescribed choices? Like, are they real choices, or is it pretty obvious usually what you should be doing? And then how much randomness is in the game. So in terms of player choices, I think it's very meaningful. You have to decide when to do things. And I think that is the main key to being good at Wingspan is when. When do you get food? When do you play that bird? When do you grab from, the cards that are displayed? Like which action, lay eggs, draw birds, gain food, which one do you do when? In what order? How is that influenced by what is going on in other people's deck? That's very important. So, if you need to play this bird and it needs a cherry to play the bird, but there's no cherries in the bird feeder, you need to decide when you're going to do that, and that has a bit of tension there in terms of when the end of the round is coming. So I think there is definitely a lot of agency in how you play the game, meaningful choices, definitely in terms of when you play things. And so that's definitely, I would say, the area of most influence when you're playing cards. In terms of randomness, there's not a lot of randomness. The most random thing is probably which of the food comes out when you roll the dice in the bird feeder. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you really don't get lucky. Some of the abilities are random. For example, You know, the predator birds where you have to pick a card, and if it's under a certain wingspan, you get to tuck that card. So that's fairly random. One game I played, I had like 5 predator birds and only managed to eat like 3 other birds like the whole game, which was very bad luck and unfortunately sunk me. Your opening hand of 5 cards can really influence your whole game in terms of the direction that you go, and so that's an area of randomness. And then, you know, your choice of bonus cards, they can really help you or not help you, so that's an area of randomness. And then, you know, the cards that appear in for display that are easy to see and get, that's an area of randomness as well. But, you know, no game is ever completely not random, and I think this is an acceptable level of randomness for the game. However, some people do note that if you start off with a bad opening hand, or you're just not getting the cards that you need, or the bird feeder's never quite right for you, that the randomness can feel like it's really sinking you. So for this reason, we've given this category a 7 out of 10, because sometimes you can have bad luck and it does kind of sink you. You don't feel like you can catch up or play a good game. Would you say that's fair, Shar? Sometimes you just kind of get sunk with the cards. Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I really had to get that pretty bird and mommy steals it from me.
Okay, the next category is replayability. So this game is very replayable. Let's put aside the fact that there's like 4 or 5 expansions for now. The base game itself is super replayable, playing it at different player counts, which we'll discuss later. But also just the sheer number of cards means that you will never play the same game twice. And so it's super, super variable, and every time is different. And even as you play through, you might have set a strategy, but then the cards that you're getting say you should go down another path. So it's very replayable. And now with the Asia expansion, now there's a new variation that's for 2 players, and now there's a 7-player variation, and way more cards again. So it's super replayable for sure. Okay, second last category is rewards and momentum. So do you feel like there's a forward momentum when you're playing? Do you feel like you're getting somewhere? Every time you do something, do you feel like you're getting something for it and you're moving forward towards your goal? And I think that's really important for the enjoyability of a game. If you play a game where there's a lot of dead actions, where nothing happens, you couldn't really do anything, you did something just because it's the only thing you could do, that does not feel good. A good example of that is like Magic Coral. So Magic Coral, if you don't roll the right dice, you literally do nothing on your turn, can't do anything, nothing happens. So don't like dead turns. And so are there dead turns or no forward momentum in this game? So I think in general, there is a lot of forward momentum. Everything you do builds your engine one step further, and so the next time you use your engine, it's a little bit more efficient, and that definitely builds. By the time you get into the 4th round, every action you do triggers 3 or 4 other birds, and so you definitely feel like your actions get better, and every time you do something, it's just a steamrolling trigger of combo things, and if you've built your combos right, it can be very rewarding. So that is definitely something the game has from the beginning. Where you start to build your engine, you get these combo moves, and you get a lot of forward momentum. Sometimes, especially at the beginning, it starts slow, like all games. But, you know, when you have to spend an action just to draw 1 card or get 1 food, those turns sometimes feel a little bit slow, but that's really just at the beginning of the game. And then even after you place your first bird, that already improves. Playing the bird sometimes feels a bit anticlimactic because the bird doesn't actually do anything the minute it comes into play unless there's a ability, when played ability. But sometimes just playing the bird, especially late in the game when you feel everything you do needs to be getting you points or something, just playing a bird out sometimes feels a little bit of a letdown. Unless, of course, it's like a 9-point bird, which can really help you. But that's a rarer feeling. I think in general, other than the first few turns where you're just starting your engine, there's a real forward sense of momentum and reward. And so we give this game an 8 out of 10 in that category. Okay. So the last category is player count. So And by player count, so obviously this game has a solo mode and goes all the way up to 7 players now. So by player count, what we mean is, does this game work at all player counts, or is there really a sweet spot? Most games have a sweet spot. That's not a bad thing in itself, but does it actually work at multiple player counts? And so we have played, I've never played the solo. I think you played the solo, eh? Shar? Maybe once? Yeah, we're not really solo gamers, but we've played from 2 to 5 and only recently expanded to 6 and 7 from the Asia expansion, which we haven't done yet. But from 2 to 5, the game scales excellently. And it plays perfectly fine at 2, 3, 4, and 5. At the bigger player counts, it's obviously going to take longer and there's a little bit more downtime in between the turns. That's almost like mini games, but it's definitely going to take you longer at 5 players, but it's definitely enjoyable and doable. And also some of the abilities, so some of the, I think from the European expansion, I can't remember, the in-between rounds abilities, the pink abilities, trigger not on your turn, but when someone else does something once in a round. And so that is obviously a way better ability when you have more players. Otherwise, if it's just me and somebody else, then that may not ever trigger. So certainly some of the cards' abilities are way more applicable in more players, but it is definitely equally as playable at 2 as it is at 5. I've been told by my friends that the 2-player variant with the sort of yin-yang symbols is excellent, and although and I've been similarly told that playing with 7 players is a little bit cumbersome. But from 2 to 5, it's a perfect game and it scales very well, and it's basically the exact same game, just takes a little bit longer. So on player count, we gave it an 8 out of 10. Okay, let's move back over here. All right, let's get this stuff back up here going. Okay, so overall, we are gonna give Wingspan an 81 out of 100, which is just a summary of these 10 categories, which I think personally is an excellent score. As I said, it's an excellent game, one of our favorite games, and a game that everybody should own. I can't say enough, if you don't buy any board game, go buy Wingspan. Even if you're not into board games, you're gonna love it, and it's a great game, and it's fitting that it's the first game that we review. So there we go. There's a summary for Wingspan, 81 out of 100. Okay, I was going to show you guys the nesting box quickly, but my throat's kind of going, so maybe we'll do that maybe in a separate video. But for right now, we will call it a night with a good review. Thank you for watching and for subscribing and following. Do hit the subscribe button. If you want to join our community, do check us out on Facebook and Discord. If you'd like to support us, you can click the join button. And otherwise, we'll be back on Thursday night at 8 o'clock for another live 40K game. Francois is bringing his hopefully tournament-winning Iron Hands filthy list, and he wants to table my Custodes army one more time just for funsies. So we're going to do that on Thursday night at 8 o'clock. And otherwise, everybody stay safe, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you for watching.